Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com. Happy to be with you on the 31st day of January 2018 as we get ready for the new month. February starts tomorrow, and probably a time where you could say this is it in regards to your New Year's resolutions. You've either done it or you haven't at this point, and I think there's a good probability that if you are not continuing to do what it is that you said you were going to do, you're probably not going to do. But glad to be with you. Once again, the number if you want to be involved is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. I do have the comment feed up on Periscope, so if there's anything you got to say, I will be able to see it in addition to Facebook. So we kind of made some strides. If you've taken a look, the setup looks a little bit better, and I think we are in a better position now to be able to interact with the audience, which was the goal all along. This is a show that I want to make sure that people feel confident. You can throw your comments in there, and I promise I do respond to just about every comment. So if there's something that you have said, hopefully you tune into either the show later on or the next show to see what I have to say about it. Thinking about a couple things, and I just caught an interview with Charles Haley on The Fan, and if you've listened to it yourself, you probably have your own opinions on it, but my issue is nothing about anything that Charles Haley said, but it brought up a point that I felt, and I feel pretty strongly, that hasn't been addressed in regards to the violence of football and what is expected out of a player that is essentially told that he is going to be violent and ferocious and is supposed to let it all hang out on the field. And coaches look at it from this perspective because coaches want the most out of each player. They do. And they want violence. They want ferociousness. They want somebody that's going to go out there and just not care about anybody's goodwill. And this is especially applies to those that are defensive players. Defensive players are expected to, and when I think of defensive players, I think of Dick Butkus. I think of Jack Lambert. I think of those that literally were looking to decapitate you on the football field. And in the end, are we going to hold them to higher standards and all of a sudden say that person isn't a nice guy? Or he's supposed to take it like it's a switch and just turn it on and turn it off. Turn it on the football field and become this beast where you just expect to hold nothing back and expect nothing in regards to remorse for anything that's done on the field. But once the game's over, you want him to sit here and answer questions all politely and talk about things in regards to calmness and not being that vicious animal that you just were on the football field. So when it applies to active players, and listen, football hasn't changed. It's not flag football yet. It's not two-hand touch. You're expecting your defensive players to play like a modern-day Albert Hainsworth or a Ndamukong Suh. Somebody that you expect in regards to literally trying to hurt the players that are on the other side of the field. We can't deny from the media standpoint, or can't deny from a football coaching standpoint, that this is what's expected out of the players that are on the field. I know we're preparing to watch the Super Bowl, which is a nice event. You get people together, you enjoy watching a game. But to the players on the field, it's not just a game. It's not entertainment. Yes, they understand that aspect, how their performance on the field is entertaining to an audience. But here's the problem. It is a ridiculously violent sport. And especially when we're talking about the defensive players that are on this field. I understand from an offensive standpoint, it's to get the ball in somebody's hands and get them across the goal line. But from a defensive standpoint, it's not just to stop the offensive player from getting across the goal line. It's to intimidate. It's to make the opposition fearful. It's to make the opposition afraid to have the ball in their hand because of what the defensive player is going to do to them. So we continue to look at this game as just that. And the unfortunate thing about it is the media continues to look at this as if this is like an everyday job. Now, I understand the media has got something to do too. So the media has the right to ask the tough questions. And that's one part of the media's job or the media's game that I will never take back from them. You know, if somebody does something on a football field or any sport we're talking about, they should be accountable to the media and have to answer the questions, even if they are a tough question. The guy's asking a tough question, you know what, you're there, you should be able to answer it, but answer it however you feel is best for you. But my problem that I'm having, because we talk about the NFL being such a violent and a vicious game, and it is. There's nothing about it that isn't violent, and there's nothing about it that isn't going to expect the most vicious of people to be not just acting vicious on the field. They're not actors. They have to be legitimately bad human beings. And I make the reference to the Batman series. You know, the character of Robin. I'm sorry, not Robin. I'm sorry, the Joker. And I apologize for sounding stupid just then. But, you know, we're talking about the Joker in Batman. He is not supposed to be a nice guy. And you could look at any actor, whether it's Heath Ledger, and some people try to put the untimely death of Heath Ledger towards the character of the Joker that he played in Batman. To be as angry and vicious as the Joker is, you can't just make believe that you are that for a little while and then turn it off once you're done filming. It's something that you have to be, not just act. And there's a difference between acting and being. And I'm sure a lot of people that play different parts in different movies or different TV series exemplify themselves in a way that they're really not. But when you're talking about something that is vicious or mean, or you're forced to act or be a certain way, you have to embrace it. And not embrace it just for a temporary period of time, and all of a sudden, once filming is over, you shut it off. In some cases, you have to be that person when you're not filming. Be that person beforehand. Be that person afterwards. And once you've done that, that allows for you to be that person even better when you're on the set. So how does this apply to a National Football League player? And I'm talking specifically to defensive players. You're taught at a young age, you know, make your presence known. Make the opposition fear you. Not just the skills that are involved in it. Of course, you have to be good. You have to have talent. You have to be quick. You have to be able to have the power, the toughness to be able to get to the player. But it's also about the presence that you have on the specific field that you're playing on. So if you're a defensive player and you want to be a star, you want to be a Hall of Famer like Charles Haley, you want to be a Lawrence Taylor, you can't just act it on the football field. That has to be the kind of person that you are. And when I look at a Charles Haley and I hear him talk, and I see that he's very angry, and I see that, you know what, even though the couple of years have gone by since he stopped playing, he may not be as ferocious and as nasty and as much of a bad person on the as he was on the football field. There's still a part of that that's in him. And this is where I'm getting to the hypocrisy. Because from an entertainment standpoint, if we're watching a football game, we want to see the big hits. And if you were a San Francisco 49er fan or a Dallas Cowboy fan while Charles Haley was helping that team win Super Bowls year after year, the guy's a 5-time Super Bowl champion. So if you followed one of those two teams at that time, you owe, one of those banners that you got hanging up in your house or plaques or shirts that you wear to commemorate it to Charles Haley. So afterwards, a couple of years later, if you want to say hello to him and he, essentially flips you the bird or blows you off, you're expecting that player to be different than he was on the football field? That's where there's a little bit of a hypocrisy in there. You want, from a fan standpoint, or from the, covering the media for, whatever outlet it is that supports that franchise, you want to see this ferociousness, this viciousness, this no regard for the wellness of another human being on a football field because it benefits you as the fan or the person that's reporting. But you expect, and I'll tell you, it had to be a lot tougher for guys like LT and Charles Haley. And Mean Joe Green. And guys from that other era, the Dick Butkuses of the world. Because there was little that was done then to keep the players' safety in mind. Players in that era were instructed to go for the head. And when you have no regard for the well-being of the other humans on the football field, that's how those guys became Hall of Famers. That's how those guys won Super Bowls. That's how those guys led the group of players that were around them and made them a better team. Now you want to knock any one of them individually and say they may not have been the best teammate? Okay. I think that's for a little bit of a different discussion. But what I'm talking about here is when you have the nature of the game that you're playing being so about violence and condoned. This is violence that is encouraged, and in some cases, coaches. You hear stories about medication that certain players should be on because they're very high strung. Coaches would make sure that they didn't take that medication so they would get the most out of them. They would be even more angry, more ferocious. More of a lack of regard of the safety of other players on that football field because it benefited the coaches. And I hope in a lot of these cases, the Bill Parcellses, the Jimmy Johnsons, the Chuck Knowles, the coaches that benefited from this type of play and this type of violence, I hope they respect the men that were there and not just the players or the animals or, if you want to word it another way, the actors. Professional football players, especially defensive players, they're instructed to inflict pain. They're instructed to play at a violent level. And in some cases, it started at a young age. So you got somebody that is continuously trying to get to the next level, trying to be the best of the best. And every single one of their coaches are essentially giving the code that you give to a dog when you say to kill. And that's what they're asking out of the players. And then all of a sudden, years go by and they develop mental illnesses and they have problems off the field. Are they turning their backs on them? Because the fans certainly do. The media certainly does. it automatically gets implied that they are bad people and they don't have regard for the wellness of the other players that are on a football field, but you already knew that. And if you're the fan and you're rooting for him, hey, hit him, and you watch him you literally knock the guy's head off to a point where the guy's laying on the field unconscious, and your defensive player is standing over him like, you did something special, do you all of a sudden say, wow, that was a little too far? I wanted you to knock him down, but I didn't want you to hurt him. Are these all things that we could teach? Because I don't think you can. I don't think this is something that you could instruct. And how does it apply to the game as it's played today? Because we could talk about the era that Charles Haley played in, the era that Lawrence Taylor played in, Dick Butkus, Jack Lambert, Mean Joe Green, whoever you want to throw in there as the ferocious defensive player that had no regard for his opponent. A similar game is being played now. And it is taught at our youngest levels. You could say coaching may have gotten better a little bit in regards to the Pop Warner level. But I remember playing high school football. I was the furthest thing from any good, but I played high school football. Coaches required, especially for the defensive players, that you try to inflict some pain when you're making a tackle, or you're in the open field, or you're hurrying to get into the backfield to disrupt a play of the line of scrimmage. Was I quick enough or strong enough to be able to inflict any pain? I'll tell you, a lot more pain has been inflicted on me, or was when I played football. I took more shots to the head than powerful shots that I gave on the defensive side of the ball. But we look at this from an entertainment standpoint, but we tend to have no regard for the athletes that we are either rooting for or in some cases rooting against. And the time that we root for them is when it's beneficial to us as a fan, when our players are making that big tackle or that big hit or that big stop that allow for the team that we root for to win the game. But once the game is over, we don't care about that person's well-being. And we think that it is similar to acting. And I told you, if you look at the history of the actors that played the Joker in the Batman series, it takes more to play that character than just to read a script. You have to be evil. And it isn't that easy to do, to be evil, especially when you're not an evil person. So from that standpoint, you're asking somebody to be, in some cases, something that they're not. And if you are an evil person, it's easy to play an evil character because you're not getting away from your elements too much. But if that person playing that evil character is a family man, is respected by a lot of others, a lot of other people, they can't be something that they're not. And if they are, it's going to impact their personal life. That person that's playing that evil character in a movie may have some issues in their personal life that they may never had before. But I think the hypocrisy that exists when we're talking about professional football players and defensive professional football players that we're expecting to hit hard, to put themselves in position, in some cases, do the equivalent on a football field of dismembering the opposition, putting hits that are so hard that we realize in the day and age that we live in that players are killing themselves because of the CTE that they're delivering from shots to the head that were an accident. These shots to the head are not accident. They're done intentionally. So to be a dominant defensive player in the National Football League, to be at a Hall of Fame level, to be a Charles Haley, to be a Lawrence Taylor, do you have to be a little messed up in the mind? And the answer, I believe, is yes. You cannot be a person that isn't mentally ill, that perhaps needs help. You absolutely need help if you're going to play at that level and have standards that are set up to you, that are, give the expectations to play at the highest of high levels, to be at Hall of Fame level. That's different than being a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro or a pretty good player or a Super Bowl champion. To be a Hall of Famer, to be a best of the best when it comes to a defensive lineman or a linebacker or a safety, you have to have little regard for the health of your opponent. And that can't just be on the football field. Similar to the Joker, you have to be that person. And I think very few of the top defensive football players that have ever played in the history of the National Football League, you could say that they are nice guys. And maybe when they're done playing, they're able to see differently. They're able to get the medication that they need. They're able to get the counseling and psychiatric evaluations that they probably needed while they were playing. And it's funny because as these guys are playing, there's nobody around them that has any regard for their mental health. So when you think of the health of the football player that's in the prime of his career, the one that's putting out these big-time hits, the one that is having no regard for the health of the players that are on the other side of the field, there's nobody that's waiting for them after the game saying, listen, I think you could see a psychiatrist. I think you need to discuss what it is that causes you to act the way you do on a football field. Because it's beneficial to the team. It's beneficial to the coaches. It's beneficial to the professional football organization. It's beneficial to the fans. So why would any of them give a damn about the well-being of a defensive player, especially after they're leading them to victory? When the Dominican Sue or Albert Hainsworth is so deranged in their mind that they're stomping on helmets of players on the opposition that are on the football field during the game, you may want to say that that's overboard. You may want to say that that's too much. But once again, you're asking somebody that you are encouraging and enabling to be deranged, to not care about the regards of the players that are on the opposition. You're asking them to take it like it's a switch that they have and just go for it when they're on the field, and when the whistle blows, stop and be a nice guy. And I tell you, the more that I've taken the time to try to understand this and try to put myself in the minds of the athletes that are playing, the football players that are playing in this situation, you see all the time. It happens every week. A player gets flagged for unnecessary roughness or for something that happens after the whistle. The whistle blows, and then they give that extra shot to a person. Rob Gronkowski, after the whistle blows, goes and, throws a WWE move on somebody's head. And we think, just like that, you're supposed to snap your fingers and stop. The whistle means just, all right, I go from being a ferocious beast that has no regard for the health of the humans that are on the other side of the field to all of a sudden, yeah, I'm a nice guy. You know, can we go out and have some cake afterwards and coffee? Butterflies, flowers. Does it really seem like that's possible? And if you think it's that simple, the truth is you probably never had yourself in that situation. You know, the people that are out there fighting MMA, I'm sure they don't want to kill their opposition. But are you really supposed to exchange pleasantries while you're out there, essentially fighting for your life in a cage? You may want to stop short of killing somebody if you're in an MMA ring. But outside of that, do you really care if you hurt your opponent? And on top of it all, do you want, once that match is over, once you've been separated, once the fight that you just went through, which essentially is a death fight, the way it's set up in a cage, you're having two people essentially fighting to death, but they're supposed to stop each other or be stopped before they kill the other person. So you're expecting that person right into passion of the old-fashioned gladiator fight where people would fight to death, to be able to stop themselves short and all of a sudden be a nice guy. Be a good interview after. While they're fighting, you don't care about their mental health. But afterwards, you're going to criticize them for not being the nicest of a person. You're not nice to the media. You're not nice to fans afterwards. You're not nice on the football field to your teammates or the opposition. But the 60 minutes during the NFL game, when they're on the field, in between whistles, you want a rabid lion, a rabid dog that's out there and that's going to do everything they possibly can to inflict pain. And then we're not going to have any regard afterwards when it comes to mental health. You don't even need to ask the question, are you okay? You know they're not okay. And yes, in the end, it's about winning. And I think there are a good amount of pro football players, particularly ones that play defense, that are able to separate. They're able to separate, you know, the vicious and ferociousness that they have on the field and apply it towards winning the game. And I think most of them do that. Most of them are able to. But still, the majority of them need professional help. The majority of them need to be medicated. And it's amazing. Like, you can even think of, you know, creating a monster. And it's been done, obviously, throughout movies and entertainment. The monster that you're creating, you want it to be vicious. You want it to be angry. You want it to be beyond hostile. You want it to be a beast. And you've created it. And then all of a sudden, you want it to listen to you. Well, if you're creating it to be such a beast and have little to no regard for anything around it, it's not going to listen to anybody, not even its creator. So I think about it, and I wasn't really thinking about how I was going to process the thought or the trek of the defensive football player that's expected to play at the highest level, that is expected to have little to no regard for the opposition, its opponent, the enemy. And I kind of do feel bad for him. I feel bad for Charles Haley. I feel bad for Lawrence Taylor. Because they were essentially asked and expected to be almost this non-human. And when I say non-human, I mean from an empathetic value as far as having any feelings. They're supposed to go out there and do anything short of killing on the football field. And I know the game has changed. We're looking out for people's heads. If they get hit in the head, it's a penalty. We're asking them not to hit too low. The defensive player has a tougher time now than it did before. But it's just amazing how you look at these people that we've essentially created as a society, and we cheer, and we encourage, and we enable to be angry, to be hateful, to be vicious on that football field. As we hit the halfway point here in the Pass Ball Show. Once again, John Pielli with you. The number, if you want to be involved, 732-364-3598. Once again, that's 732-364-3598. And I say, please, don't have any fear when it comes to calling into the show. Anything that's on your mind, I am interested in the views of others in this topic, because it's a topic that I haven't taken on yet. And the more that I talk about it, the more passionate I'm getting about it. You look at professional football players that are expected to essentially be animals on the field. And they're all of a sudden held to a different standard when they're off the field. And I think sometimes it's very difficult for anyone to tame that. And also to not be that type of person when you're not on the field anymore. A couple days until the Super Bowl. And, you know, I'm not interested in to a lot of the things that are going on the side of the game. And I got to be honest, part of it probably is the fact that I haven't paid much attention to whether it's media day or the normal stuff that gets talked about during the Super Bowl week. Because I think there's so much that's overblown about it. There's so much that just, I just think is irrelevant. You know, you always find that clown that wants to make a name for himself, that says something stupid. And I just don't want to really occupy my mind with any of that stuff. But I'm thinking of the game, and what to expect. Because what's on the line for the Patriots, and you got to look at it, and the Patriots have done something that's outstanding, making their 8th Super Bowl in the last 18 years. The only common denominators have been Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. And they are chasing almost immortality in regards to stuff that has not been done by a coach or by a quarterback in the history of the NFL. And I find that fascinating. I think it's interesting enough to look at. And if they go out there and they win, I think they'll get credit. It'll be fascinating. I think you start to think of Brady in the likes of a Jordan per se. And I think you have to go a lot further, unfortunately, and it's harder to do in the NFL and has never been done by anybody in the NFL. When you start to talk about double digits in regards to championships, you know, it's what Joe DiMaggio did. Bill Russell did it. And for those that don't believe in individual sports, I'll tell you, Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, even Pete Sampras have accomplished things that I would say very few players in a team sport have done. And they probably don't get as much of the credit that they deserve. But when we talk about the NFL and how hard it is, and you could go back to the AFL and NFL championships, you know, the Jim Browns of the world, you know, the dominance that he had on the football field when he was leading that Cleveland team. And I'm sure the dominance that he had on the football field, and he's considered one of the greatest athletes to ever live. You know, we could talk about his dominance on the football field. Going back to what I said before, he was taught to play a game that, you know, wasn't flag football, wasn't two-hand touch. It was a vicious game. And a vicious enough game that he recognized that it was probably in his best interest to stop playing when he did. Just think about what he could have done in another 3-4 years. Would have come at the expense of the rest of his life. And he deserves credit for recognizing that at a time where very few people understood. Football back then, when Jim Brown played, was not looked at as vicious and as rough of a game as it is today. It was played a lot tougher. It was played with a lot more violence. But it wasn't looked at in the same way that it is today. And once again, those were trained soldiers. They were talking about training a mind to hurt, to inflict pain. And you don't just do that between whistles. That has to be a mindset. It has to be in your head. To, once the ball is snapped, to pursue. And pursue with the intention to hurt. And then once that whistle blows, you're supposed to just stop. You're supposed to all of a sudden say, hey, I'm a nice guy. And I'm sorry for those in the media that hold these players to that higher standard and are going to knock at Charles Haley for not being a nice guy. The media benefited from him. From his performance, the fans benefited from his performance, and the coaches, who not only benefited from his performance, but encouraged the unleashing of this ferociousness, of this nastiness, of this no regard for human safety. And then all of a sudden you're going to knock a guy and say, you know what? He's not really that nice of a guy. And I say from an interviewing standpoint, if you're interviewing the guy, you got to understand what he is. He could have allowed for somebody else to take that spotlight and be the person that he was. Charles Haley was not supposed to be a nice guy. The Joker is not supposed to have a nice side. But when you're watching it, you're watching that because that's what you expect. But when you're going to go the other route and all of a sudden say, wow, he's really not nice. It's as if it's supposed to be a freaking act. How do you act being violent? You're coached to be violent. You're taught to be violent. Everything about what you do on a football field is violent. But you're not supposed to be violent mentally. You're not supposed to be deranged. You're not supposed to have issues psychologically. You're not supposed to need medication. It's unfortunate because I think it's completely hypocritical. And I think fans should take some responsibility for this too. I know I throw a lot of blame at the media. I throw a lot of blame at coaches because a lot of the coaches, I don't think deep down care, especially when they're talking about defensive players. They want them to be rough. They want them to inflict pain. They want them to have little to no regard for human life on the football field. But when that player is taking his violence home with him and smacking around his wife, smacking around his kids, because he just can't get it out of his head that his job requires him to be violent, we're going to hold that against him? The coaches don't have any responsibility in that? The media that encourages it has no responsibility in that? The fans that cheer when there's a player on the field being knocked out cold are all of a sudden going to judge that person because he puts hands on his wife? It's not to be condoned. But you've created a monster that has existed for 50 years in this game, and even longer than that if you go back to the history of pro football. It's supposed to be a violent game. Now, the alternative could be to stop it. And I don't think we'd ever get there. We wouldn't get anywhere if we had a thing out there to try to stop professional football and its violence. But we tend to be a little selfish when it comes to what we watch on the football field. And we watch and want to see the violence, and we encourage it, we enable it, and we cheer it. And then we disregard it afterwards, get on with the rest of our lives, but forget that the people that are putting this type of pain out there, that are taught to act and be nasty and ferocious and have little to no regard for the well-being of those that are on that same football field, are supposed to just act that? And then to be expected to be the best of the best. And then at the end do an interview with you and be a nice guy. They're not nice men. And you know what? I'm not going to vilify them for not being nice people. Once again, 732-364-3598. 732-364-3598. Anything that's on your mind in regards to baseball, sports, and unifying America. Spent a lot of time today talking about pro football, but very seldom do people spend time talking about what it takes to be a dominant pro football player and to be a dominant defensive pro football player. It's not just about stopping players from getting yards, stopping players from getting in the end zone. It's something that has been encouraged way past the days of a Vince Lombardi. You look at Jim Schwartz, who's the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles about to go to the Super Bowl. He learned from Greg Williams. You hear Greg Williams' name, he is not necessarily known as the nicest guy. Or he has not necessarily been known for having his players hold back. And are we going to stop that type of coaching? Because I think what you're essentially asking, if you're asking coaches to stop coaching like that, you're asking players to be less violent, which in the end is going to lead to less results. So are you asking for a half-assed product? Yeah, make the tackle, but don't hurt the guy. It's not an ideal world. National Football League has never been that way. So all of a sudden you're going to say because you don't want to see anybody get hurt, and you want the image of the league to be positive and nice. Your typical All-Pro, Pro Bowl, Hall of Fame, defensive player. You want them to conduct themselves like an animal on the football field, but a gentleman off it. It's hard to do. So the question is, what can we do as a society to help that? Well, entertainment value, from that perspective, we want to see violence. And you may not say you want to see violence, but if you're rooting for a team, you want them to inflict pain on the other team because it's a violent game. Moving on. MLB continues to talk about pace of play. And I will tell you, their potential impact on changing pace of play or doing anything better with that, I don't think there's anything that they can do that's going to change the pace of play. The biggest joke last year was when they issued the no-pitch intentional walk. How many seconds did that save off a game? Very few, if any. So now the latest twist is games that start or games that go to the 11th inning or later. They want to start with a runner on second base. And from the baseball purist that's in me, I think that's horrifying. You take a game, you're essentially changing the rules. For once again, what? How many minutes are you going to save off a game? It's not like you're seeing 14, 15, 16, 17, 20 inning games that are happening very often. You may have one that goes 18 plus a season. And that's out of every game that's played. So MLB right now, what they're looking to do is to try to create an image or create an illusion that they're doing something that they're not really doing. And that's what's unfortunate about it, because what MLB is doing is they're kind of trying to deceive you, the fan. They realize that they can't change the length of the game. But they want to send a message to the fans that they're trying, that the different things that they're doing are actually going to make a difference. It's going to piss off the diehard fan that's going to watch regardless, because what they want to see is more. So you're taking that away from them. You're changing the integrity of the game that they followed for years upon years. And you may not lose them. You may not lose that diehard baseball fan that's going to watch anyway. But you're pissing them off because you're messing with their game. And whether you're going to do the four things that I suggested a couple weeks ago when I was talking about if you're going to insert a pitch clock and make a pitcher pitch within 30 seconds, you're going to have to set a criteria for a batter staying in the batter's box. And if they step out of the batter's box more than once or more than twice in an at-bat, it should count as a strike. And for a pitcher that's not delivering a ball in a certain amount of time, it should be a ball. And a catcher that goes out to the mound too much between innings, 3 times between the catcher, the manager, and the pitching coach in one inning, and that pitcher has to come out of the game. And you grab from the baseball profits that they're making, and you demand that the time between innings is less than what it is now. And if Major League Baseball cared at all about the pace of play that they claim to do, Rob Manfred says it's such a priority to do something about pace of play, you will give money back to those advertisers. You will cut down the time between innings. And if you're not going to do that, then you don't care about pace of play. So stop creating the image that you do. And the more Major League Baseball throws the ideas out, like 11th inning, we're going to start with a runner from second base. Once you start to do silly things like that, which number one are not going to reduce the amount of time a game is going to take to be played. We're not talking about an issue of too many 15-inning games over the course of a Major League Baseball season. Are we going to get to a point where we're going to start to implement skills competitions? Are we going to have the equivalent to the National Hockey League shootout if it goes past 9 innings? Are you going to have the top players on each team have a home run derby to determine the winner? I understand it's entertainment. But once again, when we're talking about stuff that is being kind of thrown at you as a ruse, the cunning attempt to make me look stupid, and that's what you're looking at like as a fan, if you're falling for any of this crap. Major League Baseball wants, number one, your viewership, you to buy tickets, and all in all wants your money. So they're concerned because they're not making enough of it. But with the TV contracts that each one of these individual teams have, the television contracts that Major League Baseball has agreed to, MLB Network, both on television and radio, the amount of money that they're making is putting baseball in a great position. And now they're concerned. They're concerned that too many people that were going to baseball games have a subscription to MLB.com at bat and are following the games on their phone instead of showing up at the stadiums. It goes back to the thought years ago, and I'm talking about a long time ago in the late 1930s, with the advent of radio, that there was a concern that owners had that fans, instead of going to the stadium to watch their favorite team play, were going to listen on the radio. And they didn't realize at the time that it was expanding the audience. There were people that were never going to go anyway, but were going to get an opportunity to enjoy the action on the radio. And the fact that women and children were listening to a game that they weren't going to see anyway would have enough intrigue to want to go to the stadium. And now in the advanced media that we're in, we're talking about so many different ways. The ability to stream a game online, the ability to watch highlights, the ability for that person that may be stuck with a job that they have working 2 to 10 every day and may not have the opportunity to ever watch a game. They're going to see action that they've never seen before. And I'm looking at this, and I think from the baseball standpoint, they're going about this wrong. Sometimes you got to let stuff just play out the way it is. But from the commissioner's office to everybody that's involved in baseball, when we're talking about pace of play, it's like they're trying to create an image that they're trying to do something that they really don't care about doing. What they care about doing is getting more money from you. They're caring about adding to their profits. We know for a fact that all Major League Baseball cares about is money. And the only way that that's ever going to change is if they do something that's at a risk of taking money away from them, curtailing their own profits. And if you, Major League Baseball, care about the pace of play and the time of games, you will do one thing. You will make it a priority to cut down the amount of commercial time between innings. You want to set a clock? Set a clock from the last out that's made in the inning and the first pitch being thrown in the next half inning. Cut out commercials. You want to take that advertising and put that somewhere else where you have a chance to make some more money? Do what they did in the old days. Put some banners out on the outfield walls. Have every pitch be brought to you by something else. Cut down the time between innings. Because you know what? That person that's watching on TV, I promise you, is finding something else to watch because they know 3 minutes between every half inning or 4 minutes between every half inning, they're going to need something else to do. You want to cut down the time of a Major League Baseball game. Go after your own pockets. Cut down the time between innings. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 6 to 7 p.m. Once again, a little recap. Football players that were asking to be violent and essentially bad people on a football field. We turn our backs on when we realize that they're actually bad people. And I don't know how much of that we should take the blame for ourselves. How much of the blame do we put on coaches? How much do we blame on the media for encouraging it? And I'm sure in that pie that we put together, there's accountability that each one of these players have to have. But I'll tell you, the amount of blame that gets put on them is ridiculous. There should be more responsibility put on the fans, the media, and most importantly, the coaches. The coaches that are encouraging players to not take their medication just so they're a little more violent on the football field. And pace of play in Major League Baseball, you want to speed up a game? Cut out the amount of time between innings. Be back with you tomorrow, 6 to 7 p.m., Periscope, Facebook Live, and on demand on YouTube. I promise I'll catch up on the YouTube videos tonight. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.